Hey everyone, my name is Connor, so I'm a member of the ADT project team. I'll be presenting for today's lecture 5. The topic for today is going to be responsive speeches. So, to get started, let's talk about how to approach rebuttal. Fundamentally, there are two things you need to think about when you're doing rebuttal. Firstly, rebuttal in its most general form refers to the responses you give to things said by the opposition. You can rebut their arguments, but you can also rebut their rebuttal to your arguments, given that the opposition will have the chance, either at first opposition or at second or third, to respond to you. That's another part of your rebuttal. It's trying to engage with what their rebuttal actually does to your case and to their team's chances of success. So those are the two things that you do for rebuttal. What are the objectives of rebuttal? So I've got the twin towers here from Lord of the Rings to illustrate the point. There are two objectives you have. You have the offensive objective, which is to defeat the opposition's arguments, and you have the defensive objective, which is to rebuild your own arguments. Rebuilding essentially means you want to strengthen your arguments. You want to add layers to your arguments. You want to make it a more impactful piece of material that's increasing your likelihood of winning the debate. Now, the reason why I've introduced this two towers analogy is that the overarching aim that your team should have in a debate is to establish that your tower of arguments and material is taller than the opposition's tower of arguments. You could do that by proving that your arguments are likelier, that they affect a great number of people, that they affect them in a more important way than the opposition. But the general point is that you're trying to persuade the adjudicator, not by yourself, but comparatively. You're not trying to show why you're right, but why you're more right than the opposition. So it's really important to keep this focus in mind whenever you're responding to the opposition, because it means you want to be doing one of two things. Either strengthening your case or undermining their case, building up your tower or knocking down their tower. Anything else you say is superfluous. It's not going to influence the outcome of the debate. It's not going to be important. So you should keep this focus clearly in mind. You want to build the tallest tower, and rebuttal is a really important way to do that because it allows you to fortify and strengthen and protect your tower and to knock theirs down too. It's a key element of debating itself. So the first thing you need to think about in any debate when it comes to rebuttal is you need to identify the rebuttal clashes. Rebuttal is intrinsically important, as teams will often disagree on important issues. They are on opposite sides of the motion, after all. So for example, for the motion, "This House supports nationalism," teams will disagree about what nationalism looks like in reality, who believes in nationalistic narratives, what the alternative to nationalism typically would be. These are some of the things you might disagree about. And you're trying to explain why your version, why your side of this clash is true. So why your version of nationalism, why your explanation of why people actually believe in nationalism, or what the alternative to nationalism will be. You're trying to say why it's true, and therefore why your arguments are true. So you want to think about these sorts of fault lines, these divisions that will exist in the debate, because that's where you're going to win. You want to show the adjudicator that your side is right and their side is wrong. And to do that, you need to think about what the fundamental disputes will be in the round in the first place. You should be thinking about these clashes throughout your preparation time. Are the arguments you're making unique? Are they something that's contentious? Is the opposition going to say, "I agree," or are they going to disagree? If they disagree, what do you think they're going to say to dispute the claim that you're making? Because if it's completely true under both sides, if what you're saying is identically important, it's really not going to be particularly impactful on the round. But if there's a huge dispute over this issue, it's important to think about what the opposition might be getting onto, to then think about what arguments you should make. Because if you think about what are the easiest ways for the opposition to rebut this argument, you're going to give better lines of analysis, better reasons for what you're saying in the first place. And you can also start to think about, well, how can we stop those reasons that the opposition will give from being as persuasive as they could be? You might preempt the opposition's best claims. Preempting means to anticipate or to respond to before they even get a chance to speak, by giving conditions, caveats, additional lines of analysis to your material to really show that even if they say this, my argument is still true because of this reason. That sort of analysis is incredibly important, and it's something you can only really think about if you're conscious of the clashes themselves and how the debate is actually organised and what arguments each team is likely to make. So here's some tips for identifying these elusive clashes. The first tip I give is to think about what the problem is. Why has this motion been set in the first place? Why are we having this debate? That will get you to identify, secondly, whether you're responding to the same problem. Do both teams think that this is an important issue to solve, or are you trying to explain why it's important in the first place? So, for example, in this debate, this House would ban the Olympics. It may be the case that side government wants to say, we don't think this is about the quality of sport at all. We don't really care about the quality of sport. We care about the fact that hosting the Olympics can be incredibly harmful and damaging because people think it will be good for their economies, but it actually creates a whole host of issues in the long term. The flip side is that opposition might actually argue, hey, here's why creating these stadiums and hosting these international events is actually beneficial for your economy. Or they might say, look, we don't really care about that problem. What we care about is that the Olympics allows you to access sport on a global stage and explain the importance on that level. So you could agree with the problem they set out and just explain why your side is better able to fulfill that or respond to that problem. Or you might dispute the problem in the first place and come up with a completely different set of reasons, problems, arguments, etc. Finally, you might think about the different groups affected by the motion. So you may affect different people in different ways. You want to think about who is in your locket. Which group do you care about the most? And therefore, how is that going to shape the kind of arguments that you give, the strategic priorities of your case? So for instance, in the debate, this House will reduce income taxes for women. You might have this clash about, well, is this the best way of improving women's lives? Is there a different way to do so? So that's the kind of other problem question of like, can we more effectively target these issues rather than cutting income taxes? Well, the opposition could also argue, well, we actually need to improve the lives of the poor and of people of colour, and your side is not effective at targeting these people, and it would be better to introduce a counter-model or an alternative policy that focuses on these groups instead. So this sort of debate, this sort of clash, is not about are you helping women, not about is there a problem, but it's about different groups that have more or less importance. And you're going to have a discussion at some point about which team is better able to target and help these groups, beyond just simply, and also whether these groups are important, beyond just simply, is there a problem in the first place? Is sexism really an issue? You might have a comparative analysis of other forms of oppression that might exist. So that's another important thing to keep in mind. Don't just think of, helping the people, helping an abstraction. Try to think about who are the kinds of people this debate is likely to involve, and will this policy affect them differently, and what could an alternative policy do instead? So, the next thing to discuss. What can you actually rebut? Because we've had quite an abstract discussion so far of this thing called rebuttal. Well, it's important to go back to how we think you should structure an argument in the first place. And that's why we have our khaki, our summary, acronym khaki, to encapsulate this. So the four areas of khaki are context, analysis, comparative, and impact. That's a guide to making an argument itself. And you can rebut any layer of that guide. You could rebut the context of an argument by questioning the factual basis of the argument. You could say that is an illogical or untrue problem, or that fact about the world you rely on is wrong for these reasons. You could target the analysis. You could question the logical steps in the argument itself. Has the logical relationship between the cause and the effect actually been illustrated, or are there some flaws here? You could dispute the comparative. You could say, well, it's true, that harm is probably true, but is it more true under your side or our side? Here's why under our side it's actually far better. So you could question the comparative. Finally, you could question the impact. Yeah, maybe it's true, maybe it's comparatively worse, but is it really that bad? You can also defend every layer of your argument. So when you're rebutting the opposition, you should be trying to hone in on their claims and rebut their context, then analysis, then comparative, then impact. And when you're defending your own case, you should think about which areas are weakest and also what responses they're giving and which part of the argument they're targeting as well. And you can then defend it there. So you can defend every layer of your argument. So you should always keep in mind which layer is strongest and weakest when defending your case and when rebutting the opposition's claims. Now, prioritization is another really important thing to keep in mind. Debating is a constrained optimization exercise. This means you're trying to be persuasive within the rules of the activity. Debating speech is unique. It's not an essay. It's not a Facebook thread. It's not a lecture. It's not a conversation. You have time limits. You have norms about what arguments you can present. You can't just rely on emotion. You need to use logic to prove your argumentation. You only have very little time, 8 minutes in fact, for the average speech. And there isn't the time to simply say every thought you have, or to give all the different underlying layers of analysis or reasons you might have for why that thought is true. Finally, both teams have multiple opportunities to speak. So debating is interactive. It's a game of strategy because you're not simply presenting two independent arguments and then comparing them and saying, like for example, in public speaking, you might have one person speak about racism and one person speak about feminism. And there's no real interactivity or strategic element. You're just presenting your best version of that argument or that kind of idea. Whereas in debating, you're not just presenting your arguments, but you're trying to interact with the opposition's arguments and their rebuttal and show why your rebuttal is better. So essentially then, debating really is a game. It's a game of strategy. It's no different really than a board game, than a game of chess in this regard. You're trying to win the debate by giving the best arguments and giving the most effective rebuttal to defend your arguments and to beat the opposition arguments. Consequently, you need to prioritize the rebuttal you give. You can't just say everything you think of. You need to give the most important or influential rebuttal first, and you should only give rebuttal if you believe it is genuinely weakening the opposition case or strengthening your case. So it's like a filter. Is it achieving a strategic outcome? So then you say yes or no, and then if it is, you rank it. Which lines of response are the most devastating or effective? And you give those the most time, and you give them first, and you go down through the ranks to figure out what other responses you might give. What are the rebuttal techniques you should keep in mind? Because we've talked a lot about, the different layers of analysis and how you should think about structuring your material. But let's now think about, the actual skills. So as we've said before, you can reject those 4 layers of khaki: the context, the logic or analysis, the conclusion, the impact, the comparative, all of these things. There are also a couple of other things you can do. So you can actually flip the argument. So that's not saying the argument's wrong. It's saying that the claim that they've made, the opposition has made, is truer under your side. So that's explaining why actually there are reasons to believe that the argument they've made is actually more true. So for instance, maybe there's a debate which is like, for instance, let's go for the classic, this house would ban smoking. And the government team says this is going to reduce the amount of addiction. Now, the opposition might say, look, not that many people become addicted to smoking. When you ban it, you're going to send those addicts off into the black market because they're going to be desperately keen to have cigarettes, and they're not going to have a chance to access rehabilitation services or other forms of help. So what that means is that the addiction will actually get worse because those who are addicted already will not be able to seek help. And if you try cigarettes and become addicted, you won't have that openness of culture where you feel like you can go and actually get any expert advice or medical care. So you're going to remove yourself from the system in that way. So flipping the argument is not saying, no, it's wrong, no one will change their behavior. It's saying, maybe some people do, but more people do it under our side. So you explain why it's a better argument under your team. The second thing you could do is you could outweigh the argument. So you can actually make an assumption. Let's say that your arguments are true. Explain why your tower is taller than their tower. That's just explaining, well, if your argument's true, how many people does it affect? How badly does it affect them? Okay, cool. Here's why our arguments affect more people to a greater extent in a beneficial way. That's another way you can go about it. It's not actually about refuting any element of the argument. It's just about showing why your arguments are better. Importantly, throughout all this, you should not be dismissive. Try to be charitable is a debating word we use here. Don't deliberately misinterpret or strawman the opposition's arguments. Don't try to make the adjudicator believe they've said something they haven't. Instead, try to rigorously respond to the reasons they do give. Try to say, okay, so you're given 3 claims. Let's go through each claim and rebut it comprehensively. Now, this is important to keep in mind with the prioritization point, that you can't rebut every claim to infinite depth. You're going to have to pick and choose a little bit. But the point is that you want to be generally going into it thinking, oh, all these arguments could be good, rather than thinking, oh, how stupid is the opposition, they've made only bad arguments. And that's another thing you can keep in mind here. Think about their arguments as if they're good, because then you're going to give deeper and more powerful rebuttal that will make you seem more persuasive and increase your chance of winning. Okay, so how to deal with the fact that debating is actually a fair contest. So in most debates, the debate should be balanced. So if the adjudication core is doing its job, there should be arguments you can make on either side that are compelling, that are persuasive. And the reality is that it's going to be impossible, unless your opposition is completely erratic and illogical, for you to dispute every single claim they make. There's a classical debate, which is that, for instance, this House would abolish the prison sentence for non-violent crimes. Now, side government's got a really good line of analysis explaining why this is better for the victims of drug crimes, who are often people of colour from low SES backgrounds, and they can explain, here's why this is just significantly better for the lives of people who go to prison. And there's no way on the opposition to say that's not true. You can't be like, that's completely ridiculous, prison's far better than the streets. Like, maybe that's true for some people, but in the vast majority of cases, on-side government, you're going to clearly win the argument in that debate that abolishing a prison sentence is good for a lot of people who are prisoners or who would be prisoners. Side opposition will instead probably focus on stuff like, for instance, white-collar financial crime, and articulate why this is likely to deter or likely to encourage a lot of people to commit financial crimes and fraud. Now, it's kind of difficult on-side government, again, to fully rebut this argument. You can make it less likely, you can make it smaller, you can make it less impactful, but you can't just deny the fact that some people are likely to change their behavior. So what this means, right, is that there are multiple things that can be true in a debate. The opposition aren't complete Pinocchios, they aren't ludicrous liars. They're likely to say some things that are actually true. So you should resist the temptation to reject everything, or to respond to their assertions with your assertions. So they say, this is how white-collar criminals behave, and you go, no, that's not right, this is how white-collar criminals behave. You have to recognize that people have often complex and competing motives. You might be someone who would benefit greatly from committing a financial crime because you make a lot of money, but you also fear the prospect of going to prison. Those two things can be true. You could also fear the prospect of a criminal sentence less if you don't have to go to jail, but still not want to pay an enormous fine or have a criminal record. So people can be complex, just as they are in real life. In debating, you should consider people to be complex. They can have complex incentives and motives and justifications for their behavior. So instead of just saying they're wrong, it's instead better to show maybe why your incentives are more influential or more important. So an example here is the debate, this House will repeal the death sentence. The impulse to commit heinous crimes and the deterrent effect associated with the death sentence. So the idea that you might have some people who are complete psychopaths that really want to kill others, but also the claim that some people are fearful of the idea of being killed by the state. They can both be true. But your job on side government is to explain that the former is more influential than the latter. So basically, you have to explain that people will really want to commit these crimes, some people, and that the deterrent effect of the death sentence is not going to change their behavior. They're likely just to go and do it anyway. They're not going to care about the death sentence, especially when the alternative is just prison. So your job is to explain why one is more influential than the other, And then you can say, therefore, the death penalty is mostly ineffective, but then also comes with these additional harms. So, for instance, the immoral nature of the death penalty, the fact that deaths are occurring themselves, the way in which the death penalty can be politicized to eliminate opponents or to oppress people. So, what I'm trying to say here is that you should not think of debates as this kind of black and white zero-sum equation of either you're right and they're wrong. Realistically, both teams are going to be right about some things some of the time. You're trying to minimize the number of things they're right about by using your rebuttal skills, maximize the number of things that you're right about by using your argumentation skills to make arguments, and your rebuttal skills that defend and strengthen your arguments, and then you're trying to show why your version of events or your arguments are more effective. So that's how you deal with the inherent complexity of debating. You don't just reject everything they say. You really try to recognize and acknowledge that there can be some diversity and difference and some different versions of events. And there can also be some arguments which are just right or cool or effective, but you're just wanting to show why yours are better, more effective, more impressive, more important. And that brings us to the importance of rebuilding. So, as I've explained before, rebuilding fits nicely with our tower analogy. You're wanting to reconstruct material that's been brought down by rebuttal, and or just to strengthen your material generally to show why it's more important. Because a key priority, and you have to keep this in mind, is to make sure you've proven your arguments. You can't just think of yourself as this kind of machine gun rebuttal artist who's trying to knock down their case completely and not worry about your case. It's a myth in debating that rebuttal and argumentation are different things. They're really the same thing. It's the same objective. You're trying to show why your case is strong and the opposition's case is weak. So you need to work together. It's a symbiosis. It's a collaborative and complementary relationship between your argumentation and your rebuttal. Because if you don't prove arguments, so the opposition has disproven most or all of your arguments, it's almost impossible to win the debate because you have to prove, disprove, or oppose more of their arguments to really tear down their case even more. It's like having a tiny little tower. To win the debate, you have to make sure they've got rubble. They've got nothing. But every time you rebuild, it means your rebuttal doesn't have to be perfect. You can make the difference larger. You have more room to move because the opposition might say some things that are kind of right, and it's better to have proven and established clear harms and benefits. That means you don't have to perfectly respond to everything they say, but can just offer the kind of best rebuttal you've got, but know you're going to win because you presented a lot of well-constructed, well-made, and well-impacted claims. Debating can be quite subjective, so I think additionally showing that your tower is really big is just as important as showing that their tower is small. Showing that you've won by a lot will make the decision much easier for the adjudicator and decrease the likelihood of you losing a debate you believe you should have won. Put simply, it's easier to explain why you win, to kind of show the adjudicator your path to victory the way you want the debate, when you have a clear and well-proven benefit, where you've established something in a concrete sense, rather than when there's lots of different material flying around the room and you're not really sure if any team has proven anything, and the adjudicator is just taking a guess based on which material is more persuasive to them. And as I've said finally, rebuttal is not a completely separate skill. You need to make sure that your argumentation and that your rebuttal work hand in hand. Now here's a few tips on moving through your rebuttal. And there's a basic structure that can help you, because you might be thinking about all this stuff. Okay, I understand how to organize my thoughts, so these clashes. I understand the importance of defending my arguments, the importance of attacking theirs. I understand the ways in which I can attack an argument or defend mine. But how do I actually say this in a speech? Because for an argumentation, you just move through khaki. You just go, what's the argument called? And you go context, analysis, comparative, impact. And that will help you in almost all debates. You'll be totally fine just applying the structure we've given you already. But rebuttal can be a little bit confusing. So on a micro level, you want to basically trace what they've said and how you respond to it. So the opposition argued this thing. They gave 2 reasons why this thing is true. We have 2 responses, A, B, C, and D, E, F. Therefore, the thing they said X is actually untrue. So that's a very simple structure. It's just basically saying, what have they said, how have they said it, and what are your responses to the things they've said to show why it's wrong. And you conclude by saying, therefore, this is wrong. That's the simplest form of this structure. You might add additional layers, even if that argument is true. Why is X actually better under our side? So you flip the argument. Why X doesn't matter? You mitigate it. You show why it's a relatively small, unimportant effect that doesn't really have a big influence on the world. Or you might just outweigh it by showing why X matters less than an argument you've given called Y. Now you can also do some additional things with this. You can structure it based on the clashes. So you might have 2 or 3 different claims under each clash. So you might have clash 1, do you have the right to smoke in a smoking debate? And you might organize and clump the different material that's given. But this is the kind of fundamental structure you'll use in any individual claim, where you kind of break it down into its key components and you show why it's wrong. You might say opposition gives 2 reasons, and it might be the context they give and the analysis they give, and you break it down. That might be the way you go about it. Or you might focus mostly on their analysis because you think their context is strong and it's hard to rebut. And you can also guide the adjudicator through this. You can say, their argument relies on this context or this assumption that this is true, or their argument has 2 logical analytical links. If we disprove these links, then the argument's false. That kind of hand-holding, that gentle and clear explanation can be really, really useful. So let's just go through quickly a worked example. So for the debate, this House would implement a sugar tax. There's a clear kind of imperative on both sides, really, which is that both sides probably want to reduce the consumption of sugar. Well, that's the real major problem that side government's responding to. Opposition might have different ways of rebutting this. So side government might make an argument like, for instance, why this will decrease the consumption of sugar. And they say, look, for context, there's a lot of kids that have problems with their sugar addictions because of the way their products are marketed, the price of the products, etc. Here's why they're likely to be responsive to this tax. They're not going to buy these products, so their parents aren't going to buy these products. And then, on the comparative, right, if a product's more expensive, you may be more likely to buy like a piece of celery or lettuce. You're going to go for alternatives that you wouldn't go for unless the tax was there. And so therefore the impact is that you help a lot of kids live a healthier life, right? Now, in response, you can do a couple of things. On opposition, you might just give some responses saying, here's why a lot of families can't afford to buy fresh vegetables or fruit. So even if the price of sugary drinks or sugary foods go up, they're still going to buy them. And so it's actually just going to harm their work, their lives. You might make a different argument, which is the kind of more direct one, which is that even if it doesn't change their behavior, even if it does change their behavior, there are a lot of people that will still buy the products anyway because they're addicted or they really want the sugar, and that's just going to harm their quality of life too, because it's going to mean they can't afford to buy other things, including fresh vegetables. You could even argue that, well, people won't stop buying sugary products. They might just buy less of the expensive products they otherwise would buy because they need to save up to afford the sugary products. That's the kind of claim they might make. Or you might make a rights-based claim. You might say, look, you have the right to buy these products if you're fully informed, if you're aware of, the fact that these products are sugary or fatty or unhealthy, and you just want to have them because you want to enjoy them, and you think that you're in a position to do that. Maybe that's a different sort of principled claim that you can make, which says that what matters is not, is this going to harm you or hurt you, but is that the government doesn't have the right to really influence or harm this choice. So then the government might be responding by saying, here's why people still have choice. They might say things like, here's why, generally speaking, people are responsive to these taxes. And then they might say, here's why, even if that's not true, we can do things like give subsidies back using the sugar tax revenue or other things to help the poor. So do you see how the debate becomes interactive immediately and it clumps on these clashes? Is this going to stop people from drinking or eating sugary products? Is this a justified or fine thing to do with respect to the principle? Is this going to harm the poor or other individuals who continue to consume sugary products in a meaningful way? And that will filter through and affect what arguments you give, and it will affect how you rebut those arguments and how you defend your own arguments as well. So I think what that worked example is trying to demonstrate is how these arguments and debates will distill into clashes. And the most important thing to do really is to give really strong argumentation and good analytical reasons for why your arguments are true in the first place. So you really step out, why will this actually change people's behavior and stop them from eating sugar or drinking sugary drinks? Then you might, really go through and explain why it's a justified thing to do. Why does the government have a moral obligation to do this thing? And you go through all those reasons. That's a way you can approach it that will mean that you're clumping your arguments around those kind of clash points, and then also that you can hone in on, is the context of why kids are addicted really good context from side government? Have they really shown why kids or parents respond to taxes? Are they rational actors? Do they follow financial or economic incentives? Or are they irrational in some way? Are they likely to just like the taste or respond to marketing or these sorts of things and continue doing the behavior anyway? So that's why rebuttal is really critical, because it means you can defend and elaborate on the arguments you've already given, but also you can really cut down the opposition's arguments. But what I want you to think about is this kind of clash element of what are the key disputes, and the strategy element of how can I build up my tower while knocking down their tower using my rebuttal. So finally, another thing you can add in this section, you can explain why you actually win the debate. So it's very important to explain why you've won the debate to the adjudicator. The reason for that is that adjudicators, as much as they try to really follow a debate carefully and do the right thing, they can actually lose focus. It's a human error, right? People aren't perfect, people get distracted, people can be more or less knowledgeable about a certain topic, even though that shouldn't affect their judgment, it sometimes does. All these things mean that adjudicators aren't perfect, and you want to make sure that you're explaining to the adjudicator why you've won the debate and why you deserve to win the debate, to actually then show, hey, we've done enough, we deserve to win, we have won the debate for these reasons. And then you do that, then obviously you're going to win, which is the objective of the activity in the first place. So at second and third speaker, you should try to provide a roadmap, so to speak, of the debate, a kind of map, a summary of what's happened and what's happening, that illustrates the paths to victory, what each team needs to establish or to prove to then win the debate. You should then try to show why your arguments are debate winning. So maybe it's the size of your arguments, the fact that you've defeated the opposition arguments, the fact that your arguments are very likely to be true, and their arguments are very unlikely to be true. You should never just give rebuttal, just say 5 responses. You should explain the significance of your rebuttal in the debate. So why is your rebuttal defeating the op argument, and what is the consequence of this? If the op argument, so for example, you might say, in this debate, in the sugar tax debate, the opposition really needs to establish that there are going to be a lot of people that continue eating sugary products, because if they don't, then we save a lot of children and a lot of people from obesity, and the consequence to people's hip pockets, the financial cost, is really not going to be that low. But if side opposition might say the opposite, they might say, side government really needs to show that they're changing a lot of people's behavior, because otherwise this will just become a tax on the poor who are unable to afford non-sugary products, given that sugary products are traditionally the cheaper option in comparison to other sorts of products, which is why a lot of poorer individuals purchase them in the first place. So what this therefore means is you want to, especially using introduction, but also the start of each thematic piece of material you might give, or the start of a piece of rebuttal you're about to give, just explain what you're doing in the first place. Why are you rebutting this argument? What will happen to the debate or to the opposition's case if you rebut this argument? It's almost like playing a game of Jenga, and you're about to remove a piece. You're trying to explain this is why it's going to make the tower fall. Or you're trying to explain why it's going to make the tower smaller, or you're trying to explain why you're fortifying and strengthening your case, or generally speaking, just what you need to do in the first place to win the game at all, and just kind of evaluating, especially when there are different types of rights and freedom. So for instance, in the sugar tax debate, you might just explain, here's why we don't really care about your autonomy or your rights to choice when it's costing people's lives. And that might be the overall important thing that you are able to show, rather than relying on just purely rebutting, like, here's why it doesn't limit your choice. But it's saying, the roadmap is they need to show that autonomy is more important than your right to, live a healthy life and not be suffering from obesity or other issues that people that consume a lot of sugary products do suffer from. So that's another important thing to think about. Don't just win, but explain why you win and how you're winning. And that will make your job a lot easier. It will make the adjudicator's job a lot easier, and it will make the margins even larger. So that's the conclusion of the rebuttal section. I'm now going to briefly introduce you to the concept of points of information and replies. So points of information are questions that can be asked between the first and last minute of the first, second, and third speaker speeches. So for the first minute of a speech, you can't ask a POI, and for the last minute of a speech, you can't ask a POI. But between those two times, you can ask POIs. You should offer a point of information or a POI by standing up or raising your arm and saying point or POI or point of information. Over Zoom, it is quite common to type POI in the chat function, but in person you'd obviously need to do it audibly so people can hear. But you should really try not to make it something that's distracting or something that's overly confrontational. It's just asking a point of information. And you should only say point or POI. You shouldn't put any information in that POI that might influence the adjudicator or might influence a team. You should just ask point of information quite politely and be done with it. Now, you can't, once you ask point of information, you're essentially offering a point. So you can't just say what you want to say. Your POI must be accepted by the speaker before you can say it. So this is the question you want to ask. And you have a maximum of 15 seconds to ask your question, to give your POI. You should offer a POI every 15 to 30 seconds, so offering as in going up and saying point or point of information. And you should accept one POI per speech. 2 is also acceptable. You accept 2, but you should stick to 1 when you can. So you don't want to be constantly getting asked questions, because then you can't actually introduce your own material or your own rebuttal. But you should make sure you take some time to do it, because it's important for showing that you're engaging with the opposition and you're responding to their best case material, and you're giving them a chance to kind of respond to you or ask you questions, especially if you're on the opposition team and you're speaking at third opposition and they haven't had a chance to respond to your latest material or your latest pieces of rebuttal. So what's the point of POIs in the first place? POIs are quite useful. They're useful for encouraging the opposition to actually respond to your arguments. So you can use them to highlight the fact that the opposition hasn't actually engaged with what you've said, and you can try to make them do so. You can use POIs to point out flaws in the opposition arguments. And you can use POIs to show the importance of your material. You can say, why does the right to eat sugary drinks or drink sugary drinks or eat sugary food matter when so many people are obese and have their quality of lives and hence their right to choice over many other things dramatically affected? That's an example. That's showing the importance of your material and making them engage. Or you can be like, well, why would people really change their behavior and buy other products if sugary drinks will still be cheaper than the healthy alternatives? Like, that's another kind of POI you could ask. See how it's a question? It's not a statement. It's not saying you're actually wrong, you should have said this, or that claim is wrong because of this. You're asking them a question. You're asking them to engage. You're not saying, is this true, is this not true? You're asking a qualitative question. You're trying to get them to respond to the meat of what you're saying. The POI should be clear, so you should make sure they're not too long. You should say them slowly and loudly so that the speaker and the adjudicator can clearly and easily understand them. So that's what POIs are. We'll do some more work on them in the future, and you'll also have the chance to participate in our coaching program, which we strongly encourage you to do. You'll get some more experience in coaching with respect to POIs and how to ask them. Now, replies. Replies are 4-minute summary speeches. They're given, for the opposition reply speech is given after the opposition whip speech or their third speech. And the proposition reply is given at the very end. So it's quite a strange ordering where you might have third affirmative, then third negative, and then the negative reply, and then the affirmative reply. So the negative team has what's called a neg block, which means they can give 2 speeches in a row. They give the opposition whip speech or the third negative speech, and then they also then give the reply speech. So reply speeches are a biased adjudication of the debate. It explains why your team has won and why the opposition team has lost. You're not allowed to introduce new rebuttal, or argumentation, you're actually just trying to summarize it. You're stating what's happened and showing the importance or significance of different points that are introduced. Or really you're showing, why or how you've beaten the opposition. And you're using this as a chance to help the adjudicator along to really illustrate what you've already done to win the debate. It's quite useful for two things, really. Number one, if you think that the adjudicator might have forgotten things you've said earlier or has not followed the specific rebuttal, you might want to go, well, here's why what my third speaker said actually did win us the debate. Or here's why that argument that the first speaker said that the other team never responded to wins us the debate. So that's one way you could go about it. The other way you can go about it is you can use it as a chance to explain the importance or significance of material. So we showed you that the sugar tax will reduce the number of people that consume sugary drinks and sugary foods. Why is that so important and debate winning? So you can use it to actually show the significance of the importance of the claims you have made, the rebuttal you've given, the things you've done. Those are kind of the two broad categories of things you can do in a reply, but it's about this biased adjudication, this explanation of why you've won and why they've lost. It's not instead about giving you material, giving you arguments, giving you rebuttal. It's about kind of summarizing in a strategic and tactical way what's actually happened. The sign of a really good reply speech is that the adjudicator, when explaining their decision for the debate, uses some of the language choices or the kind of ideas you introduce in their explanation of the decision itself, because it shows that you've really kind of gotten their heads and you've demonstrated to them which teams won and why, because hopefully it's going to be you if they're using your reply speech as the basis for it. Finally, so like with the third speaker's speech and the rebuttal you give, you should also try to break down your reply into the 2 or 3 biggest issues or points of clash. So the clashes are a really good way to organize both your third speaker speech and your replies, because they allow you to organize your ideas to show why you've decisively won certain things or they've decisively lost certain things. So again, we'll do more on replies in future, particularly at the coaching program and also at the tournament we run. So we really strongly encourage you to attend one or both of those events, because we think that'll be a great opportunity to consolidate all these skills. So rebuttal, POIs, and replies. So just some quick debate recommendations. I think all of these debates have got some great responsive speeches. So you've got the UADC 2020 Grand Final, the Australs 2020 Grand Final, so particularly second affirmative and third negative, the Australs 2016 Grand Final, the UADC 2019 Grand Final, and the World Schools Debating Championship 2019 Grand Final. Basically, almost all Grand Finals are going to have some great third speaker exchanges and some great second speaker exchanges from either UADC, so United Asian Debating Championships, or the Australasian Debating Championships, or even the World Schools Debating Championships, because they often have some great speakers that have very strong rebuttal skills and are also great at doing replies as well. So those are some debates you should consider watching. They'll be great for kind of experimenting with these skills and thinking about how the best people in world debating do these speeches, and then what you can learn from these speeches yourself. So that brings to the end that brings this lecture to the end. It brings the substantive portion to a close. I'm just going to briefly give you a few book suggestions. So we've been doing this intermittently throughout the series. These are a few books I've been reading that could be quite useful. So the first one is called Contest of the Indo-Pacific, Why China Won't Map the Future. It's written by an Australian academic called Rory Metcalfe. Rory writes a lot on Indo-Pacific strategy, so it's specifically looking at the Asia-Pacific plus India and the United States. And Rory really talks through a lot of the kind of contemporary issues facing the region. So if you're interested in Asian politics, if you're interested in international relations, that's a great read. I'm about halfway through it, and I think it's been really good so far. The second book here is a very different type of book. It's called Giovanni's Room. It's by this brilliant author named James Baldwin, who's a significant civil rights figure, writes wonderfully, and this is a really, really excellent novel. I strongly recommend it to anyone who's interested in James Baldwin's work, or who just wants to read an interesting and sophisticated and thoughtful piece of work. I think Giovanni's Room is a fantastic text. The final recommendation is by John Fenby. It's called The Penguin History of Modern China. I also read this quite recently, just in wanting to grapple with a lot of contemporary Chinese history. It has a great summary of the Qing dynasty and its fall, and then looks at the nationalist era, the rise of the Communist Party, and then Maoist and Dengist politics and how it's transitioned to the modern day. It's quite a dense read. It's about 750 pages, a very small font, so it'll take you a while. But I think it's also a great insight into modern Chinese politics and how it's basically linked with a lot of historical trends, customs, and cultural values that really have extended throughout not only the past 150 years of Chinese civilization, but indeed the past 2,000 years under the various dynasties, such as the Ming and Tang dynasties that have ruled China in kind of from ancient times. So these are the 3 texts I recommend. Again, don't feel any pressure to read them, but I thought I'd give some book suggestions based on what I'm currently reading, so you can get an idea of how to kind of build that meta knowledge or just to kind of read some interesting stuff. So that's the end of my session. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to message the page. And I hope you're looking forward to the rest of the series and also to the events we're running in future. We've really enjoyed providing these lectures, and we really hope that you're getting a lot of value out of them. Thanks, everyone.